Welcome back, everyone, to Neighbors in the Network. I'm James Pinedo, your host, and today we have a very special guest, Logan Padgett, the Vice President of Communications and Public Affairs at the James Madison Institute. Logan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, James.
It is a pleasure to have you. So tell me, how did you join the network, and maybe start with your background? How did you grow up?
Sure. So I'm a native Floridian. I lived in Florida most of my life, in a suburb outside of Orlando. That's where I went through K through 12 school. I grew up with pretty conservative parents, but I think more importantly than that, I grew up with a dad that was really interested in American history and
Mm,
philosophy. So that was a big conversation in my household growing up. We always had dinner around the table together, and my dad would kind of either tell us stories about American history or just like quiz us about things to see if we knew about various stories in history. And so I think I was really aware and privy to what was going on in elections from a pretty young age. And I just remember a trip to Washington, D.C. In eighth grade. And I think that was like a formative moment in my life that kind of led me to where I'm at. I knew at an early age, not necessarily what I wanted to do, but that I wanted to do something in policy or politics or history or something related to that. And so in eighth grade, I went to Washington, D.C., and I just thought it was like the most magical place in the world, which is kind of silly now because I don't share that same feeling at all about Washington, D.C.
what was it
But
then, though? What seemed magical then to eighth grade Logan?
I don't know. I just thought that like this is where all of the magic happens. And this is where, people come to make a difference. And just had this like really optimistic spirit about the whole thing, which is why I say it's a little silly now. Not that I'm like completely tainted, but maybe just not as optimistic as eighth grade Logan. But at the time, I just really had no idea what a think tank was in particular.
Mm.
I knew what the Heritage Foundation was, and that was like my extent of what I thought uh, think tanks were out there. And it was just because, like I said, my family, I grew up with conservative parents, and so they were fans of Heritage Foundation, and that was kind of all that I knew. And so, yeah, I just always thought I would do something related to policy or politics, and I didn't know that I would be working at a think tank, but that from a pretty young age, maybe it was that eighth grade time frame. That's kind of the direction I thought I was going.
Wonderful. So then you took that interest in high school and pursued it in college then?
Yeah, I did like student government in high school and debate and all of that fun, nerdy stuff. And then I went to Florida State, which is in Tallahassee, where I'm at now. And I knew I was going to study political science. I just kind of assumed that I would go to law school afterwards and maybe go and uh, move to Washington, D.C. again. Like I said, that was the dream. But I took a public policy class and I learned really about what a think tank was. I
Hmm.
learned about the James Madison Institute, and that was my start. I interned one summer in college, and that led to another internship at the Heartland Institute. That's where I kind of got my start. I interned. If I couldn't get to DC, I thought, well, Chicago seems kind of fun. And so I interned there, and that led to a full-time job when I graduated.
Hmm.
And they kind of took a chance on me. There was a guy, the director of government affairs at the time was John Nodurft, and he was the one that really took a chance on me and made me a government affairs manager. And I was just really responsible for executing a lot of their outreach efforts to legislators and coalitions partners and just building great relationships. So I didn't really start out in the comm space at all. I was much more outreach and government affairs. But I do think that that particular job set me up for success because it just gave me a lot of opportunity to learn about various different policy
Hmm.
issues and how to communicate them effectively to legislators and to different partners. And then I was there for about 3 years after I quickly realized Chicago is not all it's cracked up to be, weather-wise and politics-wise.
Right. The cold, coming from Texas, that cold in Chicago just gets you. And you're the same
Yeah,
coming from Florida. You're not used to
right.
that.
Coming from Florida, I only made it a couple winters
Right.
before I was like, I don't think people are meant to live in this kind of climate.
Yeah.
And, I remember one winter in particular, Rahm Emanuel was the mayor at the time, and he declared this massive emergency citywide. And it was basically like if you go outside for more than 15 minutes, you'll get frostbite. And that was my last winter there because I just realized that like people are not meant to live in these conditions.
At least Texans and Floridians are not. That's what I can hang my hat on.
Right.
If you have that in your blood, that warm weather, it's just so hard to
And
do.
you don't ever get accustomed or
Yeah.
acclimated to it. You just don't. And Florida I covered probably about 10 states when I was at Heartland, and Florida had been one of my states. And so I had always maintained a relationship with JMI. And I was in a long distance relationship with my now husband and then boyfriend. So I was there was other factors that were pulling me back home. And so I moved back to Tallahassee, and there was a position at JMI that opened that was a director of government affairs role. About 2 weeks before I started, the only comms person at JMI left. And so they didn't have any comms folks, and I was the only government affairs person. And of course, we've since grown since then. That was 7 years ago. But my role just kind of became like this jack of all trades, where I just quickly figured out, well, I think I could write a press release, and I think I could figure out how to pitch an op-ed or post on social media. I mean, I use social media in a personal way. I think I could figure out how to do it in a professional way. And so I think I just quickly realized that if we don't have a strong brand and we're not communicating to our various audiences, not only just legislators from a government affairs perspective, but media and donors and things, then we're not really going to be able to be successful at moving policy and build coalitions. And so that role quickly just turned into like a government affairs and communications role, which then turned into more of a leadership role that I'm in now. And like I said, we've since grown since then, and we do have another communications person and another government affairs and multiple policy folks as well. But that's kind of where I went. That's a long-winded answer to your question of where I went from kind of college to now.
Yeah, that's a great thing. Thank you for that answer, and it's so generous. So, but tell me, what really sparked, it seems, is that public policy class that started off. Is that right? As I heard right, that it was just a regular class though at
It was. Yeah,
what
it
was it
was.
about
And
that
I
class?
and I just like I said, I had never been taught really what you can do with a political science degree. In my mind, I just thought I would go either work for somebody in Congress or go to law school and pursue that route. And so, yeah, it was just one particular class, and just building some relationships too within different clubs like college Republicans and things like that that led me to JMI.
Wow. Okay. So JMI had a presence there.
They did. They did. We have multiple campus rep programs
Nice.
through the James Madison Institute. So I think at the time we weren't on as many campuses, but right now we're on 14 different campuses.
Okay.
And so it's kind of their job to communicate what JMI does and what a think tank is and work with other student-led organizations on campus, and directly push our message out to conservative students, to just kind of build solidarity, I guess, on campus.
Great. That's wonderful. And clearly it works to bring talented people into the ranks at JMI as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
That's wonderful. So tell me, when they said, well, we need you to do some comms work, what was it about your personality that gave you the ability to say, yeah, I can figure this out? You said I can do social media, I can do press releases. That seems like a great leap of faith to me.
I mean, I think it's just a testament to a lot of the other people at JMI that they trusted me to kind of figure it out as I go along and learn some of these skills. And then beyond that, SPN has been really effective too at just helping us build working groups and learn from each other as well. So yeah, it was one of those things where I just really learned on the job, and now 7 years later, I'm in more of a communications role, but I didn't start out that way, and I wasn't professionally or educationally trained that way either.
Right, right. Well, yeah, it's clearly worked out well. It's clearly worked out great. And
Yeah.
JMI does incredible comms work. And I guess the question was, did you feel fear at that? Like getting, having this unknown thrown at you?
Oh, for sure. I think
Yeah.
for a long time, and
Yeah.
even, I mean, there's still moments where I lack just a little bit of confidence in the comm space because I wasn't educationally trained in communications, and I've quite literally just learned on the job. I just kind of assumed I wasn't qualified, and so I've slowly just started to realize that I am kind of good at this, and so it's been fun to learn that. And like I said, just the opportunity to take chances. And if I fail, that's okay. We'll try again. But yeah, I think that there was a little bit of fear initially, and that still creeps up sometimes, where you just kind of don't feel like you're quite qualified to be where you're at, but you might be.
Oh, I think you are. As an unbiased,
Oh, thanks, James.
what I guess as a Texan, I think I can say this is that Florida really does, at least from my perspective, lead the country, and that's when it comes to the freedom movement. And
Sure.
I think that's really a large testament to the great work that you all do at JMI. Like I mean, in no small part to what you all do, and that goes to show that you're a well-oiled machine. You're doing great work, and I'm very excited by all the things that I hear coming out of Florida. Um,
Thanks.
so I guess going back to that, is it something what you really said that interested me was you were okay to take a chance, and if you fail, it's okay. What made you okay to just take a chance? Like, not everyone would be okay with that. That's something that's unique to you.
Well, I think part of it was just the fact that there wasn't anybody else in a communications role. So I knew that somebody was going to have to step in. And we kind of just weren't in a position, or we always anticipated maybe hiring another communications person down the road. But in the gap where there wasn't one, um, I just kind of knew, like I said, that if we weren't effectively communicating and we weren't building up our brand, either on social media or through earned media, we're not going to be effective at building relationships with legislators and moving policy because they're not going to know who we are.
Mhm.
And so it was just, I think that was maybe a little bit of my inspiration to just take a chance and prove that I could maybe do this.
Mm.
And like I said, I thought we would hire a communications person, and here I am. I am the communications person now. We have a comms manager, Nicole, and she does all of our social media and our email marketing and website stuff that I used to do. And then Sal on my team, who's our senior vice president, he does a lot of our policy work as well. He has a government affairs component to his job where he meets with legislators and testifies during committee and things like that. So we've since expanded, but I think it was just a situation where I knew it had to be done. So I was going to just give it a shot
Mm.
and see where we go.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm glad you did. Can you tell me of a specific moment that you've seen an impact that maybe some of your comms work or something in the larger JMI has had in your state?
Yeah, in the last couple of years, we've tried to make an effort to tie a lot of our policy work to storytelling
Mm.
because I think that our policy wins fall flat if we don't know for sure that we're having an impact on people's lives for the better. And so one in particular, there's a family in Tallahassee that we worked with when we were trying to pass universal school choice.
Mm.
And they're a lovely family where they have 9 kids and they live in just this really small, somewhat low income neighborhood in Tallahassee. And they bought this first starter home and they thought they would be there for like 2-3 years. And here they are 16, 17 years later, and they're still in the same house. And the neighborhood itself is a neighborhood where, there's not a lot of father figures in the neighborhood. So Harold Edwards kind of became a father figure for a lot of the neighborhood kids as well. And it's a really sweet community, but all of their kids have all they've been in some kind of school choice program. And so some of them have done traditional public schools, but a lot of them have done charter schools, homeschool, private school. And so they have maintained that the reason that they have stayed has been because of school choice, that they would never have been able to stay in that neighborhood because the public schools are not what's best for their kids. And so they've utilized school choice, and it's not only had an impact on their kids, but I saw just talking to Harold and walking around his neighborhood with them that it's had an impact on other kids too. Because if Harold hadn't been there as this father figure to these other kids, who knows what their biological kids what their lives would look like, but all of the other kids in the neighborhood too. And so that was really my inspiration when we were working on universal school choice, to say that, I want every kid to have an opportunity to go to a school that meets their needs, and what other father figures out there can help in their community, and be there for kids that might need it, and how is school choice going to impact their ability to do that. So
That's beautiful. Can you say the name of the family one more time? I want to read that story.
it's the Edwards family. So her name is Talithia and his name is Harold. And we did this really awesome video. It's on our website that kind of talks about their story. We interviewed them. We interviewed 2 of their kids. So yeah, go check that video out. And we've written just a few stories. Like, we've used their stories in different op-eds, and a lot of the meetings we had with legislators and testimony just throughout the process. They kind of became our North Star, I guess, if you will, when we were pushing that policy.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I look forward to watching that video, and I'll share it in the link in the description for people, the folks listening or watching at home, because I think that could be a lot of that would be a great inspiration for all of us.
Yeah.
On the other side, what about a challenge or maybe even a failure that you've had now as you're in your time of leadership here at JMI?
I mean, I think a challenge, like I said, was just this nagging feeling in my head that maybe I'm not the right person for this job. We've produced quite a few other storytelling videos that maybe didn't turn out the way that we wanted them to. And so that's that's just a very simple failure to point to, where it either wasn't the right message and it kind of fell flat. But that would be the easiest thing that I would point to.
What kept you going when you had those nagging fears? Like, how did you meet that and continue on?
I think it's kind of cliche to say, but my kids would be an inspiration for me. I mean, like I said, I'm a native Floridian, and if I can do anything to make sure that they stay native Floridians and they want to stay here as well. And I think that people look at the state of Florida and they say, well, Florida's always going to be the free state of Florida. And but I often like to say that might not always be the case. And so if you look at like the state of California, if Republicans could turn the state of California red, do you think that they would if they had the opportunity? And the answer is yes. And so I think that could happen on the other side too. And it's happened in Virginia. It's happened in Michigan. And so I think things can really change quickly. And so, like I said, it might just be cliche to say my kids, but I want them to be in Florida forever. And I want them to have a strong education growing up. And I do think that things that I have to worry about and we have to worry about as parents this day and age, about what our kids are learning about in school, and what pressures they're facing online through social media. And, if you can even really walk through some stores in town without having to have a hard conversation with your kids about some of the things that they see. Those are not things that our parents had to worry about when I was growing up. And so trying to, to the extent that we can keep Florida the way that it is, so it's that way for my kids, I think that that's a big inspiration for me. And that job really never stops.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Thinking about my kids, if there's something that is difficult in my professional life, you definitely are motivated. I speak about it as like pressure, it's like, okay, you put this pressure on yourself because of your kids. It's like there's like, you don't really have a choice after you've made that decision to figure out a solution, right? Because your kids, they're there. They're not going
Right.
away. And so you want to find a solution, you keep going. At
That's
least on
right.
mine. Does that kind of sound similar?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, well, I'm glad you have. Besides your kids, are there any other inspirations that really keep you going or thought leaders that really inspire you?
I mean, I look at other people in the network, I think, as inspirations, and many of them you've interviewed as people that are just doing great work. And I think, particularly in the storytelling space, there's a lot of people that very effectively tie policy to stories and how it impacts people. And so I'm really thankful for SPN kind of just giving us the ability to network with other folks that are doing the same thing in other states and to learn from them. So I would say that that's been an inspiration. Again, maybe another cliche one, but that's been an inspiration for me to look at other people that are in this role and how are they effectively keeping their states the way that they are, or changing them and moving policy well.
Absolutely. I think that rings true on my end as well. I was wondering if you might say Taylor Swift. I was listening to one of your I was listening to one of your
No.
podcast episodes. I think you mentioned you were hoping to get a Taylor Swift concert ticket or something like that. And so I noticed.
That's funny. Yeah, I am a big Taylor Swift fan, and we've actually done a lot of work on where like we've been able to use Taylor Swift as just an example to maybe message some of the policy things that we work on in a way that broadens our audience and gets
How'd you
people.
do that? Tell me about that.
Well, we've worked a little bit on the Ticketmaster situation, and just like we had Sal went to go testify at the U.S. Senate hearing that they held on DOJ, the antitrust hearing, and so he testified, and when he was working on his testimony, I said, Sal, you've got to drop a couple Taylor Swift lyrics in there because I just think that it would be like comic relief, but I think that you could get some media attention from that. And he did. I mean, it just blew up. And he was on the cover of, or the front page of the New York Times. And you had like it was like him and then Ted Cruz and like other people that all also made Taylor Swift references. I mean, it was just like the perfect timing to for that to take place because it had been right after all of the blow up with people not being able to get tickets. And so that's been an opportunity where we've kind of been able to tie pop culture to policy, which has been fun. There's been another one too, like there's some rumors that the IRS, like all of the new IRS agents, are going to start looking at people that are selling tickets, either through StubHub or through Venmo or whatever it is, and taxing them on the profits that they make on selling tickets. And so if you think about what some of these tickets are going for on the secondary market and what they're going for on Ticketmaster, I mean, people are making people are selling tickets and they're making their money sometimes 3 times, 4 times more than what they paid. And so we like issued a statement and participated with an event with the CFO about, why this is wrong and why the IRS should not be going after. They tax us in so many other different ways, and why the IRS shouldn't care about what you're doing with your Taylor Swift tickets. So that's been fun.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay, I'll have to check out. I want to find out that reference that he made. I'll look for the video. But now that we're talking about Taylor Swift, what's your take on she's dating that football player, the Kansas City Chiefs? By the time that this airs, they might have broken up already. That's probably that's my take. But what's your take? It's everywhere, so we should weigh in on this.
I think we should. I've always said that I think that she needs an athlete. I think that she needs somebody outside of the music industry or Hollywood, an actor, and she needs like a good old boy athlete. And so I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see it. I do think it's funny the amount that it's blown up.
Yes.
Like I've seen this trend on social media where it's like you ask somebody, I can't believe Taylor Swift is putting Travis Kelce on the map. And, nobody knew who he was until they started dating. And like, that's the joke, because Travis Kelce is one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and people absolutely know who he is. But it's been funny to just watch all of this blow up, and the sports and the pop culture industry kind of
Colliding. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I don't watch the NFL much, but
Neither do I. Yeah, but I have been paying attention now.
Yes. It's in my Twitter feed, so that's how I came across.
That's right.
Okay, well, speaking of Taylor Swift, if there is someone on the other side of, the policies that JMI stands for and is trying to push, what's something that you wish that what could we try and communicate that we wish that could understand our side of the policies, and then maybe vice versa? What's something that we can try and understand better about those that push against the policies that we're pushing for in the movement?
I think just to start, civil discourse is required in order to be productive in this space. And I think that we can really learn from the richness, I guess, of different philosophical and political traditions. But we have to begin from like some place of shared understanding that we were probably most of the time after the same goal. I think a lot of the heated debates that we have in many areas are kind of about the means and not necessarily the end. And if you really think about it, we might all agree on the outcomes. For example, we want to change policy in order to better people's lives, and we just have somewhat vastly different ideas on how we'll get there. And some folks might believe government's the answer, and where some other people believe that maybe it's the private sector. But I think that if I were talking to somebody that disagrees with me in the movement, starting from a place of, we have a similar common goal. It's just different in how we get there. But understanding the maybe the philosophical beliefs that they have and how that factors into the way in which they get to their end, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it might not even be, it's like challenging the assumptions that we make, and then also trying to understand how the assumptions on those that argue against us are formed. They might not even realize how those assumptions are formed, but if we can understand that, then we can dialogue better. That kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. I like that. Okay. Well, tell me about some of the biggest challenges. I'm going to really, what you just said, I'm going to take to heart and think quite a bit. But moving forward, what are some of the big challenges that are facing your state, Florida, and then the country as a whole?
I think particularly one of the biggest ones in Florida that's just kind of niche to our state is we're growing at such a huge rate where there's like over 1,000 people a day that are moving to the state of Florida. which is great because they're moving here because of our great policies, the ability to choose their kids' education, and it's easier to start a business, and we've reduced barriers for them, and we don't have an income tax, so they get to keep more of that income. But it's created an issue with homeowners insurance, which is kind of like a wonky thing, but
That's something that
we
you have firsthand knowledge of too, and so many other people that have hit by the hurricane. So this is very pertinent. I'm sorry, go ahead.
right. Yeah, no, and I think that what people don't quite understand is the hurricanes do have an impact on the rates for homeowners insurance, but that's not the biggest thing that's driving it. We have a lot of litigation going on in Florida, and you really can't drive down the highways in Florida and not see some kind of billboard for a trial attorney or or somebody that wants to represent you. And there's of course cases out there where people have been wronged by either their homeowners insurance or their car insurance company, but a lot of times it's a lot of frivolous litigation going on, which ends up, of course, factoring into everybody's rates. And so our homeowners insurance is one of the most expensive in the country. Our car insurance is the same. And so as people move here, it's like I always joke and say it's like the only downside to moving to Florida is that if you buy a house, your homeowners insurance is going to be really expensive. And so that's one of our main policy priorities, is to try to fix that. And of course, it's going to take a lot of time because it's been the way that it is for many, many years. So it's going to take a lot of time for the market to settle and for it to come back down, and those policy changes to really have an impact. But I think that that's just kind of a niche issue here in Florida. And then I would just say generally the overall economy. I mean, everything has doubled, and my $100 is worth half of what it was 2 years ago. And one last thing I think that is a big challenge, not only maybe to the state of Florida, but just to the country as a whole. And it might sound strange coming from a comms person, but for me, it's social media. I think that the rate at which people are believing what they see online or forming their opinions through sound bites that they get on X or Twitter, and they don't really have a foundation for what they believe anymore. And that could be, it sounds strange coming from somebody that spends a lot of time on social media professionally, but I see that a lot. I see people build their foundation on what they believe based on what they're reading on social media. And that can be really concerning, I think, for the future generations.
What's the solution to that? That's a twisty problem right there. That's a difficult one.
I think a couple of programs that we do at JMI that I'm really passionate about, and again, this goes back to some of my inspirations, being my kids and making sure that I'm teaching them to think for themselves and to understand American history, to just like pick up a book and read and really formulate their own thoughts and opinions. But we not only have our campus rep program that I mentioned that's on 14 different campuses around the state, just helping to connect conservative people on campus or with different resources. But we have a civics program too that we do, where we go into, normally it's elementary and middle schools. And we have like it sounds cheesy, but we have like a Ben Franklin reenactor, and he comes along with us. And we do programming in schools to kind of teach kids about civics and our founding documents and our founding fathers. And I think just having more of an emphasis on that. There's been some legislation in Florida to require a civics class in schools, and obviously they take American history and things like that. But I think that those are a couple of programs that we're doing in order to make sure that kids have a foundation and they're not maybe necessarily just believing everything that they read online or what their friends are telling them.
Yeah. So instead of censoring, it seems like that seems to be the knee-jerk reaction really to a lot of these, a lot of the concerns that I hear. Instead of that being the initial reaction, it's education. It's kind of dedication to
Yeah,
education.
I think it's just trying to reach the next generation
Yeah.
with some background and some foundation,
I like
rather than censoring them from what they're maybe learning elsewhere. Because you're never gonna effectively be able to do that.
Right, right. Well, it's similar to what you experienced with that public policy class a little bit, where there was an awakening, and you're not
Yeah,
going to be able to reach every student, but you try to maximize the amount of awakenings that are had. Like seeing what kind of what can we how can we send out the call and who will respond to it.
absolutely.
That's really cool. Were you inspired by The Office with the Ben Franklin impersonator, or
I
not?
mean, I love him. He's really fun and he like really embraces his character.
I love it.
Even when I see him like at the office, he'll like come to our office and then he'll ride with us to the schools that we go to. Um, he's like in character already. And
That's
his real
awesome.
name is Lloyd. And so I'll be like, hey, Lloyd. And he'll say, I don't know who Lloyd is. And like he like gets into character and um, talks about Ben Franklin and they play like games like are you smarter than a fifth grader? Like those kinds of style games, but really about, and they ask questions from like the citizenship test that people have to take to see if students can actually answer them. And so it's fun to watch him do that and to see the kids light up and learn from that kind of experience has been fun. And we've done it in Tallahassee and Central Florida and South Florida, and we're kind of building up that program more so that we can reach more kids. And we have some materials too that we work with. We work with a local newspaper as well to disseminate materials to teachers so that they kind of have some foundation for when they teach civics in classrooms. And so we're reaching the teachers as well as the students.
That sounds wonderful, and a very rewarding project. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. What
Sure.
about other hopes or goals that you have there at JMI looking forward a few years?
Well, like I said, there's almost a thousand people moving here every day. And so it's probably not realistic, but I really want every single one of them to know who the James Madison Institute is, um, because I think our mission is really important in what we're doing. And then, of course, I mentioned previously that I want to keep Florida the way that it is and just continue to, maybe not the way that it is, but like continue to move in the right direction. And so we really need those people that are moving into the state of Florida to become supporters of JMI so that we can do that.
Mhm.
But I mean, I have like I mentioned, our civics program, our campus rep program, because the next generation, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we have in reaching. I think a hope or a goal for JMI would be to continue to build up that program so that we can continue to reach more students. Um, that would be a big hope of mine that we're able to do that.
That's exciting. I can't wait to see and hear more about the wonderful things you accomplish with those goals. Last question.
Sure.
Who else can you nominate for us to interview next on Neighbors in the Network?
I think you should interview Holly Wetzel at Mackinac.
Yeah.
Um, I think, or there's a lot of folks at Mackinac, Taylor and Jarrett. They're all doing really great things in their state, and we work with them a ton. And I think that they're in one of those particularly interesting states where, I know like last session, they were one of the first states to pass right to work, and now they're one of the first states to repeal it and roll it back. So they're in kind of a particularly interesting area where in Florida um, we're on the offense where we can come up with new policies and new things that we think the legislature should do. And in Michigan and some other states, they have a completely different strategy. But what they're doing and the impact that they're having, I think, is really important.
Lovely. Okay. Well, we'll be reaching out to Holly shortly. Thank you for that nomination.
Sure.
And thank you for joining. Thanks for chatting. I really enjoyed getting to chat with you, and I've learned a lot, and I'm going to go learn more. So thank you very much, Logan.
Thanks, James. I appreciate it. And like I said, thanks for all of the work SPN is doing to help JMI grow and other organizations within the network.
Well, it really gratifies me to hear that we've been able to be of help. I know that that really motivates a lot of us to be able to help others. So thank you for saying that. And we'll see you all
Sure.
next time.
Thanks for listening to Neighbors in the Network, an offering from the State Policy Network. We hope that this podcast can serve as a place for empathy, understanding, and human connection. Please let us know about your thoughts in the comments section. And thanks again.